Sebastian Meise's Great Freedom is a riveting cinematic sucker punch that chronicles the decades of continuous imprisonment and persecution of one gay man because of paragraph 175 in Germany. The film stars one of today's most exciting international artists, Franz Rogowski. In the decade plus that he's been working in cinema, he's delivered indelible turns in Michael Haneke's Happy End, Sebastian Schipper's Victoria, Christian Petzold's Transit, and Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life. He will soon be seen in new films by Ira Sachs, Gabriele Magnetti, and Terrence Malick again. Willkommen, Franz.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, it's early in the morning for me. I'm still a little punchy. Franz, I've been following your career since Victoria, and you made quite an impression as boxer back then. It was an amazing performance, and I wanted to start off by asking you about that particular performance, looking back, and that shoot. It must have been simultaneously maddening, and was it as enjoyable as it seemed as well?
I must admit that it was quite there was quite a lot of pressure on our shoulders, since we only had like 3 nights, and you know, we brought it down to 10-minute sections that we would rehearse and shoot over a period of 2 weeks. Like every other night we would shoot a segment of the movie, so that in theory we could edit. But at the end of the day, it was clear from the start that we wanted to do this one take wonder, and we had 3 chances to do so. First time it was so-so, everybody happy, but nothing special. Second time we felt great, but apparently it was awful, and especially me and a friend of mine, we were apparently the problem. So there was a lot of pressure on the last take, which turned out to be this movie in the end. And I'm not sure I'd call it pleasure, but for sure it was full of life and energy, and I can remember some of it. Yeah, as it was, like if it was yesterday, you know. Like I remember me finally being shot, finally dying, and the movie is still rolling, they're still rolling, but they're leaving me. And our crazy DOP is finally leaving me, and they're finally doing the end without me, and I'm dying on the street. And it felt so great. It felt like such a relief.
Wow. Well, you know, before we discuss Great Freedom, I want to say one thing about the many things I appreciate about your performances. They're always brimming with ambiguity. You leave us hints, but then you allow the audience, I think, to do the work, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, yeah, thank you very much. I mean, looking at your room, I kind of think you are a cinephile and you've seen quite a lot of stuff. And you're right that I'm trying not to explain too much, since I don't know, my love for cinematography is also based on the fact that each of those layers that create this code, this specific language, is actually leaving space for the other layers to become a family. And if an actor is explaining everything, then it's better to make a podcast, you know. If the image is showing everything, then why to talk at all? And I think it's always been inspirational to me to create a character that is somehow in a constant relationship with the other elements, and light can tell more than language sometimes, and sometimes language is better than editing, and sometimes not. So I'm happy that you like some of the stuff we did.
Well, I think that's why, you know, it's interesting. I watched In the Aisles last night. It was the second time I've seen it, and I noticed, you know, again, you know, there's this thing throughout your films where, you know, they're isn't as much dialogue as there is. It's almost like going back to the days of silent film. It's using the medium visually, and that's in part what the medium is for. You know, it's there's theater and there's film, and it's just, I think it's fascinating the way you know how to work the camera. It's not really a
Yeah,
question,
sometimes
but
I don't really know how to do it. Sometimes they just do it with me.
well, that's very humble. So great freedom came from these real reports of gay men who went to the concentration camps directly into prisons, which is insane and yet not. Can you tell me how this project came your way?
Yes, I got a script, and um, yeah, I read the script, and from the start I felt inspired again, because I felt like these characters, they keep a secret to themselves. They are not totally readable, and they are all looking for similar things, but their approach and their method in life is very different from one another. And I found it also very simple in its form, and therefore I had a feeling we could do a lot of things within those walls. And yeah, then we met, and turned out that we really liked each other, and we felt like, okay, let's do this movie together. Of course, obviously, it's also an important topic to talk about. It's also its political dimension is shocking and also inspiring when it comes to storytelling. But to tell you the truth, what brought me into this project was my believe in the structure they created and the way they played with language and images, and it was all there in the script. It felt like, okay, I need to do a very bad job to turn this into a mediocre film, but I cannot destroy this script. Too good.
You know, the fascinating thing about Hans, though, is as a protagonist, he's not a Norma Ray. You know, he's not somebody who sets out to be a hero. He has virtually no freedom his entire adult life. He's no freedom to love, no freedom to live. He's just basically being persecuted, and yet you give him this, I don't know if hope is the right word, but he is a survivor, you know, where Oscar couldn't be.
Mhm.
You know, Oscar couldn't handle the horrors, and yet there was something about Hans that could. I don't know, what would you call it? I mean, Oscar calls him fearless, yet almost in the same breath, Oscar says that he's better at fooling himself.
Mhm.
It's difficult to see.
Yeah, mhm. Yeah, I think we see Hans in different moments in his life. In the 40s, he's a broken man, um, and yeah, he's in the 40s. He's rather turning into architecture. He's like sitting on a bed, or he's standing in a frame, or he's holding an object. He's a very passive and broken uh, person. In the 50s, he's someone who is full of hope again, and who's dreaming, and he's almost like a rebel fighting for a freedom that is not there yet. In the 60s, we see someone that might have found more freedom than the rebel, but not because he fought the fight and won. It's more because he surrendered to this system and finds freedom within those walls, finds freedom within paying the price for the life he wants to live. And that was also something I found interesting from the start, to see someone that is actually not aiming for freedom, let's say, on a straight line, and interpreting freedom as something that means borderless and open. But I think Hans' freedom is rather defined by walls and by structural violence that he accepts to live in. And I would never know how it feels to be Hans for real, but I know how absurd freedom can feel. And sometimes in moments of great success, you don't feel free at all. And sometimes in moments of loss or moments of loneliness, you get a glimpse of the biggest freedom you can think of. And I think that was something that I found very interesting, Hans' approach towards freedom.
That's fascinating. Well, how immersive an actor are you, Franz? Do you find it differs with each role and each director, or is there a specific approach that you go back to over and over again in terms of how deep you go and how quickly you can come out of it?
There's one approach I always follow. It's like, okay, fuck, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. I'm a human being. I have no magic trick. I need to cook with water again. And we all know how hard it is to cook with water and make something good. But I want to cook good food. So what am I going to do? This is the same thing always. And then I start to read, and I start to read again and again, trying to get closer to what is there structurally, like how the story is told. And I try to create a relationship with the fictional reality and create something that is real for me and my body and my experience as an actor. And I start painting. That's something I always do, and writing a lot in the script. So I paint little paintings or little cartoons for the characters, and I come up with physical strategies. Like in Victoria, I would go to K1 classes, even though I never did any fighting in this movie, but I wanted him to be a guy that could. And yeah, in Hans' case, for example, I knew I can't pretend to be knowing what it means to have gone through the horror of a concentration camp in the 40s in Germany. But what I can do is I can bring my body into a physical state of weakness and exhaustion. So I did that. And I can not know what it means to be gay in the 50s in Germany, but I know what it means to love. I know what it means to belonging for something. So I am always trying to find ways to bring my own life experience to the character, but also, I guess I never really pretend to know who the character really is. I'm more trying to understand what is the shape of the character, what is the internal space that I am allowed to feel, and then I am the character. I bring myself to the character, but the character is an is a being, is a creature. The character is someone I respect, I deeply respect, and I cannot be the character. This is not possible.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on the notions of how gay people, queer people were persecuted in for such a long time, and are still being in parts of the world, and what your history might have been with queer acceptance growing up in Germany, as opposed to how it may have shifted in terms of you're becoming an actor, and certainly in the creative world, how it is different with exploration, artistic exploration and things like that. Could you speak a little bit about that, just from a personal account of growing up in Germany?
Yeah, I was not really aware of this paragraph being so aggressive till the 90s, basically, in Germany. So it made me realize that some of the experiences I had were actually very clearly based on the fact that people were not only, let's say, a little bit, I don't know, not open-minded or uneducated, but it was literally dangerous to be gay, since it was illegal. It was a crime to love a man when you were a man. And that led to a lot of homophobic humor in school. Me, for example, my mom always encouraged me to do my weird things, like wear clothes that are not supposed to be worn by a man. Or I had a lot of colors in my hair. I remember I had green hair, blue hair, red hair. I did a lot of weird things, and my mom always liked it, and she told me that it's fine. But the reactions around me, they were full of fear. People were actually scared because it was kind of wrong to do it. Or I remember we went to a piercing studio, or back then, and we went to a jeweler, and I wanted to have an earring. And yeah, well behaved, I sat down on the chair, presented my ear, but apparently it was the wrong ear. We didn't know why. My mom didn't know, I didn't know. Then we found out that there's a gay ear and there's a straight ear, and I could laugh about it with my mom, you know. But the truth is that I'm a lucky guy because I had a mom that protected me. The truth is I grew up in a country where I was not allowed to have an earring in the wrong ear. And I think, yeah, looking back at my own childhood and upbringing from the perspective of someone who made this film now and knows a bit more about the paragraph, I think that there's a lot in our collective memory still to overcome and to talk about. You know, I live in Berlin in a bubble. Here it seems all fine and everybody is fine, and we, you know, hug and kiss each other and nobody cares. But the truth is, you take the metro 20 minutes out of Berlin and there's a different world out there. Still, let's say, trapped in the 90s, in the 80s.
Very much the same here in New York City, which is sad. I feel like if Fassbinder were alive today, you'd be his new muse. Or at the very least, somebody he'd cast and then probably abuse. One or the other.
Yeah, I mean, that's my job. I get abused for money.
Yeah.
And I know how to do it. I can give a good service. Yeah, it's part of my job.
I want to ask about you have great chemistry with all three of your main actors, George, Anton, and Thomas. It's tremendous. Was there an extended rehearsal process so that you were all able to get to know one another and bond?
Again, very different from one another. I think me and Thomas, we went on a trip together. I have a van with a sofa, a convertible sofa in the back, and we both love climbing. So we spent a couple of days climbing and sleeping in this van. So yeah, we got very close, and then it felt almost natural to be this couple for the time being on set. And with Georg, it was more, you know, us shooting in one cell, and then in the other cell next door, we would hang out. And he's a chain smoker, so I started chain smoking, and we would smoke and drink coffee all day. And he loves snooker, so we were talking about snooker, and there was no rehearsal at all with him. With Thomas, I would talk about the characters and how it feels like to be this and to be that, and we would look for a common ground to be on together and intimate. And with Georg, it was more based on this mutual agreement that we like each other and that we appreciate each other's art. So we could just fool around and not rehearse at all.
That's awesome to have three different, and yet it all came together so well. I had a Lucifer question. I got to see the film. It's an extraordinary performance. And there's this tremendous bond between you and Susanne Jensen. It was so intense. I wanted to ask you if you could tell me what attracted you to Johannes, that you wanted to discover who he was.
I mean, obviously, this very close relationship he has with an eagle and with nature, this very archaic bond he has also with his mother, and all of this in combination with this simple-minded perception of the world that he seems to have, that was very inspiring to me, since it left so much potential to a physical approach, and also this was a very well-written script that Peter Brunner wrote, that was inspiring to read, and it felt like, okay, he's really someone that from author cinema point of view is very much busy with finding a code for his own work, finding a code for the world that he wants to talk about, and to create a language that he wants to play with. So I wanted to get to know him, and I wanted to get to know his storytelling. Then I remember him sending me a video of Susanne Jensen. She's a real, how is that called? Not a monk, a priest. She's working in the church, and she's also a survivor of abuse. She was abused throughout her entire childhood by her father. She was living in a cellar-like room for years, locked in her room, and she has an incredible physical memory of the violence the movie is also talking about. And Peter was interested in inviting her to use this biographical material that she brought with her. And I was kind of a servant to her, or I was kind of an assistant to her, channeling this energy. So I would I would meet her every morning, and we would do paintings together. And then she would, as a priest, but before shooting it, and I had nothing to do with the role, but she would tell me how I should act, my character. And she was very interested in having a son for 2 months shooting the movie. And she told me also that she wants me to be her son for the time being on set. And I agreed on that. And I said to her, yes, I mean, I am not your son, but I will be your son for these 2 months. So we had a lot of mother-son moments before going on set, painting things, writing things, her mentoring me. And it was a very unique and special approach that shaped our characters and gave this movie the texture it has.
A beguiling piece of cinema. Yeah, can you speak a bit about working with the great Terrence Malick? You made A Hidden Life for him, which is a masterpiece, and you recently completed The Way of the Wind. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in both cases, I would just fly in for a day or two and improvise the hell out of the moment, just to try to create some nice colors and moods and atmospheres for Terry to use and to choose from when he is going back home and starts his famous editing process that creates like hundreds of versions of the same material. And I mean, since he is shooting often improv based and often also mood based, rather atmospheric, he has hundreds of hours of material, and then he starts wondering, okay, what is this movie actually about? And he starts listening to the material. So I was one of those guys being with him for a short amount of time, creating moods and atmospheres. That's very different from being a character over a period of 1, 2, 3 months. And it's also something that can go terribly wrong if you don't instantly connect. And I think the incredible thing about Terry is that he can instantly see who you are and use the color that you bring. And I think that's also one of the reasons why many actors, yeah, sort of say there's a time before Terry and after having worked with Terry, since it feels so much like, okay, finally someone sees me, and he really turns into this father figure, seeing you, wanting you, telling you that the way you are is just perfect for what he wants this moment to be. And then you start opening up and doing things that the moment brings, and you start improvising in a free way, free of judgment. And that, I think that's pretty unique and gives Terry this particular strength for the moment and the mood that has shaped the last movies he did. I mean, I think back like 40 years back, I think the approach was very different. But the last movies he's done, they are very much based on improv and going with a small crew on a hunt for moods and atmosphere.
Wow. Well, Franz, I could speak with you all day. Unfortunately,
Oh, yes.
we don't have the time, but I have one last question for you. I know you're currently filming Ira Sachs's new film, Passages, with Ben Whishaw, and you and Ben are a couple in this. And I know the basic plot is that one of you falls for a woman. Sounds very interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about this film?
Yes, as you mentioned, there's a couple. They're together since a while, many years, and one of them falls in love with another person. So it's a mess, it's really chaotic, and it hurts. So they have to figure it out, and things, yeah, they don't go terribly wrong, but it's very dramatic. And yeah, as it, like, I think my character wants everything, and therefore he might lose everything. He's not able to understand the beauty of a compromise.
Oh, nice. Okay, I love that, and that's a great way to finish. I want to thank you for taking the time and being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time.